She had practiced the speech 14 times on the walk over. The cafe was only 3 blocks from her school, close enough that she could still hear the last bell echoing somewhere behind her when she turned onto the wide Gangnam Boulevard, backpack bouncing with every step. She mouthed the words as she walked, eyes fixed on the pavement, lips moving just slightly. A woman in heels stepped around her without looking down. A delivery man on a bicycle swerved past. The city didn't notice her at all, which was usually fine. Today it felt like a rehearsal for something she wasn't ready for. She stopped on the pavement outside Café Munhua and looked up at it. Floor-to-ceiling windows, warm amber light spilling out onto the street even though the sun hadn't set yet. The faint sound of jazz, low and unhurried, drifting through the glass like it had nowhere better to be. Through the window she could see people on laptops, a couple sharing something in a small bowl, a barista moving slowly behind the counter. It looked safe. It looked warm. She adjusted both straps of her backpack. The sunflower embroidered near the zipper had been stitched by her caregiver 3 birthdays ago and had survived everything since. Took one breath that didn't quite steady her, and pushed the door open. The bell above her chimed, the warm air pulled her in like arms. She stood just inside the entrance and scanned the room the way she had learned to scan rooms. Quickly, carefully, reading faces before committing to anything. The woman typing in the corner too distracted. The couple by the window, no. The older man with the newspaper, he looked kind, but she needed someone who looked like someone a teacher would believe. Someone who looked the part. Her eyes moved to the far corner booth, and stopped. Half hidden behind a low shelf of green plants, almost like he'd chosen that spot specifically to be difficult to notice, sat a man unlike anyone else in the room. He wasn't loud about it. That was the strange thing. He wasn't dressed to impress, or leaning forward or commanding the space the way some men did when they wanted to be seen. He was simply sitting, one hand resting around a black coffee cup, a paperback book face down beside it, eyes slightly lowered, completely still. Charcoal suit, one button undone at the collar, a jaw that looked like it had never carried anything as light as a casual expression. He looked, Elowen thought, like someone who made serious decisions for a living. He also looked, and this was the part that kept her feet moving forward when every sensible instinct was telling her to turn around, like someone who would not laugh at her. She practiced the opening line one final time in her head as she crossed the cafe. "Sir, excuse me. I know this is strange. I just need—" She stopped at the edge of his table. He didn't look up immediately, not rudely, more like a man who had learned that most things that interrupted his silence weren't worth the energy. Then something made him raise his eyes. And the moment he did, the moment his gaze landed on her face, something happened that Elowen did not have the vocabulary to name. He went still, but before we continue, kindly hit the subscribe button and tell us where you are watching from. He was looking at her the way a man looks at something he stopped letting himself believe in. She didn't know that. She knew only that he was looking at her, and that the speech she had practiced was completely gone, and that her fingers were gripping her backpack strap tight enough to feel the stitching. She lifted her chin. "Sir," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. She would be proud of that later. "Excuse me, I know this is strange and I'm sorry for bothering you." He said nothing, just watched her, not unkindly, but with an intensity that made the air feel heavier. "My school has something called Family Day tomorrow." The words came now in a careful practice stream. Everyone has to bring their dad, or someone who is, like a dad, for photos and a signature on a form and just standing there mostly. She paused, recalibrated. "My teacher said it's important, and everyone's been asking me who I'm bringing and I keep saying someone is coming but—" She stopped, because the next part was the part she hadn't practiced. Because every time she got to it in the mirror the words came, out wrong or her throat closed or she just skipped to the end. She looked at him directly. "I don't have a dad. I don't have anyone I can bring." Her voice dropped, not from weakness but from the particular exhaustion of saying a true thing out loud. "I just need someone to stand next to me for 1 hour tomorrow morning, sign their name on a paper, take one photo, that's all. And then you never have to see me again." The jazz played softly. Someone across the cafe laughed at something. Elowen stood completely still and waited. Ryu Hajun looked at this child. At the careful dignity in her posture, at the way she was holding herself together with both hands, at a face that was so achingly, devastatingly familiar, that looking at it felt like pressing on a wound he had spent 9 years learning to live around. What came after it was standing in front of him, asking a stranger to pretend to be her father. The cruelty of that, the specific surgical cruelty of how fate had arranged this afternoon, was almost elegant. He set his coffee cup down very slowly. "What time?" he said. Elowen blinked. Of all the responses she had prepared for, a no, a confused look, a call for the barista, she had not prepared for what time. 8:30, she said. The school is in Mapo district. Unbit Elementary. Something crossed his face so fast she almost missed it. I know where it is, he said quietly. She stared at him. How? There was a pause. Brief, controlled. I know the area. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. She was only 9 years old, and feeling a sense of relief, she decided to let it go. So, she searched his face. You'll come? He looked at her for one long moment, at this child who had walked 3 blocks alone, practiced a speech on the pavement, pushed through a door into a stranger's afternoon, and asked for the one thing she needed, with more grace than most adults managed. He thought about 9 years of photographs taken from respectful distances. 9 years of school fee transfers routed through 4 shell accounts. 9 years of watching from the exact right distance to keep her safe and the exact wrong distance to be her father. 1 hour, he said. Photo signature. His eyes held hers. That's what you said. That's what I said, Eloin confirmed very seriously. Then yes. He picked up his coffee. One day, the smile that broke across her face was so sudden and so radiant that the woman at the laptop 2 tables over looked up without meaning to. Eloin pressed both hands to her backpack straps. Thank you, sir. I'm Eloin. Do you want to write my teacher's name? I have the form right here. I printed it this morning. I can give you the... She was already unzipping the front pocket of her backpack, pulling out a neatly folded paper that had clearly been handled many times. Ha-Jun watched her unfold it with both hands, smoothing the creases flat on the edge of his table. She slid it toward him with one finger. He looked at the form. At the line that read, Parent Guardian Name, he picked up the pen she was already holding out to him. A short blue pen with a chewed cap, the kind that lives in the front pocket of a child's backpack. And wrote his name in the clean, precise strokes of a man who had signed documents worth hundreds of millions. Eloin read it upside down, her lips moving slightly. Ha-Jun, she said. That's a nice name. Eloin is nice, he said. She beamed. They left the cafe together at 4:17, the man in the charcoal suit and the girl with the sunflower backpack walking side by side through the amber late afternoon light of Gangnam like the most ordinary thing in the world. He was 2 steps behind her, watching the way she walked, her natural bounce, the way she talked without looking at him, already explaining the format of the family day event with the focused energy of someone who had been rehearsing this too. She said her teacher's name was MSO, and that she was strict about punctuality, and that the photo station had a blue backdrop, which she thought was a strange choice. Ha-Jun listened to all of it. For the first time in a very long time, he was not thinking about anything else. Then, the slight pressure behind his right ear, almost imperceptible. He had worn the earpiece for so many years that he sometimes forgot it was there. He never forgot what it meant when it activated. A voice. Low, controlled, urgent in the way that only his most senior lieutenant ever allowed himself to be urgent. 3 words delivered with surgical precision. Boss. Soul. Rivals. Ha-Jun's jaw tightened by a fraction. He kept walking. Beside him, Eloin was still talking. Something about the blue backdrop, something about her friend, Sora, who was bringing her grandfather and how that counted as a dad figure according to MSO's rules, which Eloin personally thought was a generous interpretation. Does 8:25 work? She asked, looking up at him. I like to be 5 minutes early. He looked down at her, at the face he had been watching from a distance for 9 years, at the girl who had walked into a stranger's afternoon and changed everything about it with 14 words and a chewed blue pen. 8:25, he said. I'll be there. She beamed. They left the cafe together at 4:17, the man in the charcoal suit and the girl with the sunflower backpack walking side by side through the amber late afternoon light of Gangnam like the most ordinary thing in the world. He was 2 steps behind her, watching the way she walked, her natural bounce, the way she talked without looking at him, already explaining the format of the family day event with the focused energy of someone who had been rehearsing this too. She said her teacher's name was MSO, and that she was strict about punctuality, and that the photo station had a blue backdrop, which she thought was a strange choice. Ha-Jun listened to all of it. For the first time in a very long time, he was not thinking about anything else. Then, the slight pressure behind his right ear, almost imperceptible. He had worn the earpiece for so many years that he sometimes forgot it was there. He never forgot what it meant when it activated. A voice. Low, controlled, urgent in the way that only his most senior lieutenant ever allowed himself to be urgent. 3 words delivered with surgical precision: boss, soul, rivals. Ha Jun's jaw tightened by a fraction. He kept walking. Beside him, Elowen was still talking. Something about the blue backdrop, something about her friend, Sora, who was bringing her grandfather, and how that counted as a dad figure according to MSO's rules, which Elowen personally thought was a generous interpretation. Does 8:25 work? She asked, looking up at him. I like to be 5 minutes early. He looked down at her, at the face he had been watching from a distance for 9 years, at the girl who had walked into a stranger's afternoon and changed everything about it with 14 words and a chewed blue pen. 8:25, he said. I'll be there. She gave him one satisfied nod, like a businesswoman closing a deal, then turned and walked toward her caregiver's building at the end of the block, backpack bouncing, curls catching the last of the gold light. Ha Jun stood on the pavement and watched until she turned the corner. Then he pressed the earpiece. Talk, he said. His voice had changed completely, quiet, flat, every degree of warmth gone. The voice that ran operations across 3 cities. Rival faction moved 2 key assets into Seoul this morning. They're not hiding it. They want you to see it. A message, Ha Jun said, or a distraction. He looked at the corner where Elowen had disappeared. His expression did not change, but something behind his eyes sharpened into something cold and absolute. The look of a man recalculating every variable at once, who had just realized that this afternoon, which was supposed to be nothing, had become everything. Get the car, he said quietly, and nobody moves until I say so. He put his hands in his pockets and walked. Behind him, Café Munhua glowed warm and golden in the late afternoon, the jazz still playing, the coffee he had left on the table still faintly steaming. Like a small, ordinary life he had briefly borrowed and set carefully back down. He told himself it was the lighting. That was what he decided. Lying on his back at 2 a.m, staring at the ceiling of his penthouse, with the city glowing 30 floors below him, and 17 unread messages about rival faction movements sitting unopened on his phone. The lighting in Café Munhua was warm and soft, casting a gentle glow that seemed to ease everything around him. He had been tired, distracted, and sitting alone for 2 hours, only accompanied by a cup of black coffee and a paperback. A familiar ache settled in, one that came whenever he allowed himself to pause and truly feel it. The girl had simply walked in at the wrong angle of light. That was all. He rolled over. Ginkgo trees, last yellow leaves, a path, a convenience store on the corner. A grandmother walking a dog in slow loops, the thin, pale light of a Seoul autumn morning that hadn't committed to warmth yet. He sat, waiting. He repeated to himself, one last time, with quiet logic. She is just a child who needed help. You helped her. Today you will spend 1 hour in a school, sign a form, take a photograph, and walk away. And that will be the end of it. Footsteps echoed on the path. Small. Quick. He looked up. Elowen came around the corner at 7:58, her uniform pressed, her hair styled into 2 neat flat twists, held in place with small gold clips. A backpack rested on both shoulders, and in her hands, she clutched a small paper bag from the convenience store, the top slightly crumpled from her grip. She saw him and her whole face changed, relief flooding in so fast and so openly that it hit him somewhere undefended, like Amara used to look when she was trying not to show how much something mattered. Stop, he told himself. You came, Elowen said. I said I would. She walked over and sat beside him, leaving a careful, polite gap, very proper, and placed the paper bag between them without looking at him. I got you something because you helped me. There was a pause. She was studying the path ahead. It's banana milk. I didn't have enough for coffee. The agiosi at the store said everyone likes it, but I wasn't sure if you were an everyone person. Ha-Jun looked at the paper bag. An everyone person. The words were so precise, so unexpectedly insightful, that he almost smiled. He reached in and took out the small yellow carton, pushed the straw through and took a sip. Good choice, he said. The smile she was trying to contain broke through anyway. She looked at her shoes quickly, pressing her lips together. A gesture so familiar, so achingly specific that his hand tightened slightly on the carton before he could stop it. Amara had done that exact thing. The suppressed smile, the quick look away, the pressed lips. He had loved that habit. He had teased her about it once, and she had thrown a cushion at his head. It's a common expression, he told himself. Millions of people look away when they smile. It means nothing. Okay. Elowen turned to face him, pulling out a neatly folded paper from her bag. We should practice. Mezzo asks 3 questions at the event. I researched what she asked last year. He took the list from her. Read it. What is your child's favorite subject? What does your child want to be when they grow up? What is something your child is proud of this year? He looked at the list for a moment longer than necessary. What are the answers? He said. Elowen straightened slightly, like a student preparing to present. Math is my favorite subject. I want to be an architect. I changed from doctor, but I feel more sure about this one. And I'm proud of my science project. It was made from recycled materials. It placed second in the district competition. A small pause, almost involuntary. It should have placed first. Ha-Jun looked at her. He had not expected that last part. The complete, unself-conscious certainty of it, it should have placed first. Delivered not with arrogance, but with the quiet, factual confidence of someone who had looked at the result honestly and refused to pretend it was fair. Something shifted in him, something he couldn't immediately locate or name. Then next year, he said, it places first. She looked at him sharply, like she hadn't expected that response at all, like she'd been bracing for the gentle correction adults usually gave. Second place is wonderful, you should be proud. For a moment she just looked at him. Yes, she said simply, like he'd confirmed something she already believed but hadn't been allowed to say. He handed the list back. She folded it precisely, put it away, clicked her pen twice. A thinking habit, he noted, and looked back at the path. There's also the photo, she said. We will stand together. I'll be on your left because that's the side closer to the window and the light is better there. You don't have to smile. I don't smile in photos, he said. That's fine, it'll look serious and cool. She said this with complete sincerity. One more thing, she turned to face him more fully and there was a slight shift in her energy, still composed but underneath it something careful. Something that had been waiting. What should I call you? She kept her voice even. In front of the teachers and the other parents, the question landed simply, but they both understood its weight. Ha-Jun looked at her, at this child with Amara's eyes and Amara's smile and Amara's habit of pressing her lips together when something moved her, and felt the suspicion he had been arguing against since 2 a.m. move through him like heat through metal. She's the right age. He had last seen Amara 10 years ago. Elowen was 9. The math sat in his chest like a stone he could neither swallow nor remove. Coincidence, said the rational part of him. There are millions of children in this world. Resemblances happen. You are not doing this. Then why can't I look away from her face, he thought to himself. Ha-Jun is fine, he replied. Or, he stopped. Elowen waited. He should say Ha-Jun. Clean, simple, appropriate for what this was. A favor, 1 hour, a photograph and a signature. That was what this was. Whatever feels natural to you, he said instead. She absorbed this, thought about it seriously, the way she seemed to think about everything, fully, without rushing. Then quietly, like she was testing the weight of something fragile. Appa? The word was barely sound, more breath than syllable. And it went through Ryu Ha-Jun like a current through still water, spreading out from the center of his chest to every edge of him before he could brace for it. Redirect it or do any of the things he was extraordinarily good at doing when something tried to reach him. His jaw held, his expression held, everything visible about him held, but inside, something that had been sealed for 10 years cracked along an old line. She could be yours, said the voice he had been silencing since last night. Look at her. She could be yours and Amara's. And you have been sitting here this whole time, not letting yourself, if that's comfortable for you, he said. His voice came out level, controlled, the exact right amount of casual warmth. A man who had negotiated in rooms where a single wrong syllable cost lives had never worked harder for a neutral tone. Elowen nodded once, satisfied, and wrote something on her list. Then she looked up at him with those large gold morning eyes and said with complete seriousness, You're not going to cry during the event, are you? Because Ms. O will think something is wrong, and then she'll ask questions. Ha-Jun looked at this child. No, he said, I won't cry. Good. She clicked her pen. Neither will I. They sat together on the bench in the thin autumn light, the girl who had no idea and the man who couldn't prove what he was beginning to believe. While the ginkgo trees dropped their last yellow leaves and the city woke up around them. They reached the school gate at 8:24. Families were already gathering. Fathers in office coats, a grandfather in a good blazer, one mother managing 3 things at once. Children everywhere, pulling sleeves, pointing excitedly at the photo station visible through the entrance. Noise, warmth, the specific organized chaos of a school event morning. Elowen slowed just before the gate. She looked at the other families, at the fathers standing beside their children with the comfortable ease of men who had been doing this for years. Then she looked up at Ha-jun beside her. Tall, composed, charcoal suit, the kind of presence that made people instinctively make room. Something passed across her face. Quick, soft, gone almost before it arrived. But he caught it, the look of a child who had wanted this, exactly this, someone standing beside her at this gate for longer than she could explain, and maybe longer than she fully understood. It reached into his chest and held on. "Ready?" she asked, her chin lifted and her voice steady. "Ready," he replied. She walked through the gate first, with him following behind. Out of habit, his eyes scanned the surroundings, taking note of everything in his path, nothing concerning. He was about to look away. Then across the courtyard, near the entrance steps, a man in a brown coat glanced over, one of the other parents waiting. Their eyes met. The man's gaze passed over Ha-jun with ordinary disinterest, then snagged. He looked again. Ha-jun noticed it immediately, the double take. The slow-building spark of recognition, struggling to attach itself to a name and context it couldn't quite grasp, but drawing closer with every passing second. The man wasn't afraid. He was trying to remember. That was the more dangerous kind. Ha-jun shifted his attention back to Elowen, who had spotted her friend Sora near the entrance and was waving. Sudden, unguarded, the full brightness of a child whose morning had already exceeded everything she had hoped for. "Elowen," she turned. "Stay, close today," he said. Easy, warm. The entirely natural tone of a father saying an entirely ordinary thing. She smiled up at him. Gold clips, gold light Amara's eyes. "I will, Appa," she said. He didn't let himself react. He did not look back at the man in the brown coat. But the face was etched in his memory, clear and unchangeable. As he followed Elowen through the school doors, stepping into the noise and brightness of a morning he hadn't planned to be part of. The school hallway was loud in the best way. Children running to find their parents. Teachers clapping their hands trying to keep some kind of order. Colorful drawings pinned to every wall. The smell of crayons and floor polish and something sweet baking somewhere in the building. Elowen walked through all of it like she owned every step. That was the first thing Ha-jun noticed. Outside, at the cafe, on the park bench at the school gate. She had been careful, measured, holding herself together with quiet discipline. But here, inside these walls, she expanded. She greeted a girl named Sora with a hug that nearly knocked the smaller girl sideways. She waved at her teacher from across the hallway with her whole arm. She pointed out her classroom to Ha-jun like she was showing him something precious. "That's my desk," she said, pulling him gently by the sleeve to the doorway, the one by the window. "I asked for it at the start of the year, and Ms. O said yes." "Good seat," he said. "The best seat," she corrected very seriously. He almost smiled. Ms. O was a small woman in her 40s with sharp eyes behind round glasses and the calm, unhurried energy of someone who had seen everything a classroom could produce, and was no longer surprised by any of it. She greeted each family at the door, shaking hands, making notes on her clipboard. When Elowen arrived with Ha-jun beside her, Ms. O looked up. And for just a fraction of a second, her eyes moved between the girl and the man in the charcoal suit with undisguised curiosity. "Elowen," she smiled warmly at the girl, then extended her hand to Ha-jun. "And you must be—" "Ha-jun," he said, shaking her hand. Firm, calm. "Wonderful." Ms. O made a small note. "We're so glad you could make it. Elowen has been looking forward to today." Elowen, standing beside him, said nothing. But her chin lifted exactly 1 centimeter. The quiet pride of someone who had said someone is coming for weeks and had just been proven right. Ha-jun saw it. It did something to him that he couldn't put down. The Family Day program, moved in 3 parts. A short classroom presentation, a group activity, and then the photo station near the window at the end. Ha-jun sat in a small plastic chair in the second row. A chair built for a much smaller person, which he managed with more dignity than should have been possible, and watched. Each child stood at the front with their parents and said 3 things: something they loved about their family, something they were learning, and something they dreamed about for the future. Most of the children were excited and loud, some were shy, hiding behind their parents' arms. One boy forgot all 3 of his lines and his father finished them for him while the boy laughed with his face in his hands. The room was warm, bright, ordinary in the way that only genuinely happy places are ordinary. Ha-jun sat in his small plastic chair and felt strangely and without permission, like he was watching something he had missed. Then Elowen walked to the front. She stood there without holding anyone's hand, straight-backed, gold clips in her twists, hands relaxed at her sides. and looked at the room like the room was lucky to have her. "My name is Elowen," she said clearly. "And this is my—" She paused for a brief moment. "This is Hajun. He came for me today. He came for me today." She didn't mention Dad. Not the story she could have told, just the truth, wrapped in something simple and clean. Hajun looked at his hands for a moment. "Something I love about my family," Elowen continued, "is that we don't need to be big to be real." She said it simply, like it was something she had thought about for a long time and finally found the right words for. The teacher wrote something on her clipboard. 3 parents exchanged quiet looks. Hajun did not move. "Something I am learning," Elowen said, "is that asking for help is not the same as being weak." There was a pause. "I used to think it was, I don't anymore." She glanced at Hajun when she said it, just for a second, quick, small. But he caught it, and something behind his ribs pulled tight. "And my dream," she said, "is to build things. Big things. Buildings that make people feel safe when they walk inside." She thought for a moment, then added with complete honesty, "And I want a family that stays." The room was quiet for a beat longer than it had been for any other child. Then Ms. O started clapping and everyone joined in, and Elowen walked back to her seat beside Hajun with her chin up and her hands folded neatly in her lap like she had simply reported the weather. Hajun looked straight ahead. A family that stays. He thought about Amara, about the morning he had woken up and she was gone. About the way he had told himself over and over that it was better this way, that people who loved him ended up in danger, that leaving was the kindest thing she could have done for herself. He had never once considered what she might have been carrying when she left. The stone in his chest got heavier. The group activity was drawing. Each child and their parent sat together and drew something. Ms. O left the prompt open on purpose. "Draw whatever today means to you." Elowen pulled 2 sheets of paper from the stack and handed one to Hajun with a purple crayon. She kept the red one for herself. "You don't have to be good at it," she said generously. "I'm not," he confirmed. She giggled. It was the first time he had heard her laugh, a genuine one, quick and bright, completely unguarded, and it caught him off guard, so much so that he quickly focused on his paper again. They drew in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Around them, other families laughed and compared drawings. The room smelled like crayons. Somewhere outside, a bird was making noise. Hajun drew a building, simple lines. He was not lying when he said he wasn't good at it. Elowen drew with focus and care, her arm curved slightly around her paper the way children do when they don't want anyone to see until it's finished. When she finally set her crayon down, she looked at it for a moment. Then she slid it across the table to Hajun without a word. He looked at it. It was a family. Drawn in red crayon. A tall figure and a small figure, standing in front of a building. The building had big windows. The small figure had a round puff of hair. The tall figure was wearing what was clearly meant to be a suit. At the bottom, in neat printed letters, "My dream family." One day, Hajun stared at that drawing for a long time. The tall crayon figure in the suit looked, with all the unintentional honesty that only a child's drawing can manage, exactly like him. He did not trust his voice. So he picked up his purple crayon, and at the bottom of her drawing, beside her words, he drew one small thing, a tiny building with big windows. The same one Elowen had drawn in the background, but with a small sunflower outside the door. He slid it back. She looked at the sunflower, touched it with one finger. She didn't say anything, but she folded the drawing with both hands and put it carefully in the front pocket of her backpack. The same pocket where she kept the form. The important pocket. Hajun looked at the wall and breathed slowly. Then came the moment that changed his temperature entirely. Near the window, while families were moving toward the photo station, a boy, stocky, loud, with the particular confidence of someone who had never been told to lower his voice, leaned over to Elowen and said, "Just loud enough. Is that actually your dad? You don't even match." His own father was 2 steps away and hadn't heard. Elowen went still. Hajun, standing beside her, heard every word. He did not raise his voice. He did not move quickly. He simply turned his head and looked at the boy, calm, direct, with the full weight of eyes that had made grown men reconsider their decisions in much more serious rooms than this one. The boy looked up and went very quiet. Hajun crouched down, slowly to eye level, and said in a voice that was completely pleasant, "Families don't have to match, they just have to show up." He held the boy's eyes for one more second, then stood back up. "Enjoy the rest of your morning." The boy said nothing. Hajun turned back to Elowen. She was looking at him, with an expression he hadn't seen on her face before. Something open and a little stunned, like a door she had been keeping closed had been pushed gently from the other side. She didn't say anything. She reached out, took his hand and wrapped her small fingers around two of his, then turned toward the photo station as if it were the most natural thing in the world between them. Ha-jun looked down at their joined hands. He did not pull away. He walked her to the photo station like that. This man who ran operations across 3 cities, who had not let anyone reach for him in years, holding the hand of a 9-year-old girl in a navy uniform and gold clips, who had no idea who he was, or perhaps some part of him was beginning to think who she was. The photo station had a blue backdrop, exactly as Elowen had predicted. She positioned herself on his left side. The light is better there, and stood tall. He stood beside her, hands at his sides, not smiling. The camera flashed. Ms. O printed a copy on the small printer by the window and handed it to Elowen. She looked at it for a long moment. In the photo, the man in the charcoal suit still and composed entirely himself. Beside him, a small girl with gold clips, big bright eyes, and a smile so wide it looked like it had been waiting a long time to break free. Elowen held the photo carefully, the same way she had held her drawing. "Thank you," she said quietly. Not the polished, prepared thank you from the cafe. This one was smaller, realer. Ha-jun was about to answer. Then her hand moved to her collar. An unconscious habit, the way people reach for things they always wear without thinking about it. And she pulled out a small locket on a thin chain. She opened it the way she always opened it, without looking. By feel, she glanced down at it, then held it up slightly to check the photo inside in the bright window light. Ha-jun's eyes dropped to the locket, and every thought he had stopped. The photograph inside was small and slightly faded. A woman, young, beautiful, warm, dark skin. A wide smile that pressed her lips together in a way he knew better than he knew almost anything else in the world. Amara. Younger than he had last seen her. Happier than he had ever managed to make her in the last hard months before she disappeared. Standing somewhere outdoors, laughing at something off camera, completely unaware of the photo being taken, completely alive. His vision did something at the edges. Elowen closed the locket gently, tucked it back inside her collar, and looked up at him. And whatever she saw in his face made her pause. "Are you okay?" she asked. He could not immediately speak. "Ha-jun?" Her voice was careful now. Her hand, still loosely holding two of his fingers, tightened slightly. "Who?" He stopped, cleared his throat, tried again, keeping his voice level, keeping his face neutral, holding himself together by the thinnest thread he had ever had to hold. "Who gave you that locket?" Elowen looked down at her collar, then back up at him. "My mom," she said simply, "before she got sick." There was a small pause. "She said to keep it always, so I do." The classroom noise continued around them. Children laughing. A parent talking to MSO, the printer humming. Ha-jun stood completely still. The room tilted. He had spent 10 years believing Amara had run, that she had chosen to leave. That she had decided, wisely, rightfully, that his world was not the one she wanted to stay in. He had accepted that story because it was the only one that allowed him to breathe. She hadn't run, she had been here, or somewhere close, alone, sick, with a daughter, his daughter. The math that had been sitting in his chest since last night was no longer just math, it was a fact. Standing in front of him in a Navy school uniform with gold clips in her hair, holding a photo of a life he hadn't known existed. She looked up at him with eyes that had always been, from the very first second in that cafe. His own eyes in Amara's face. "Ha-jun," Elowen's voice again, quiet, steady. She was watching him with that particular careful attention she had, older than her age, the attention of a child who had learned to read adults because sometimes it mattered. "You look like you saw something that surprised you." He looked down at her, at his daughter. "I did," he said. His voice was barely above a murmur. "I think I did." She studied him for one more second. Then, in the way that children sometimes decide to give adults the grace of not being pushed. "Okay," she said softly, and turned back toward the window, still holding his fingers. Outside, Seoul carried on with its ordinary Friday. Cars, coats, coffee cups, and the city going about its business. Completely unaware that inside one elementary school classroom, a man who had built walls around himself for 10 years, had just seen every single one of them come down. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He already knew who it was before he looked. The message was 4 words. "They know about the girl. Ha-jun." Read the message once. Then he put the phone back in his pocket, like it contained nothing important, because Elowen was still beside him, still holding 2 of his fingers, still watching the other families move around the classroom, with the calm, satisfied look of someone whose morning had gone exactly right. He could not let her see anything on his face, So he locked everything down. The shock, the grief, the 10 years of wrong conclusions crashing into each other all at once, and packed it somewhere deep and cold where it would wait for him. He was good at that. He'd been doing it since he was younger than she was now. Elowen, his voice came out normal, easy. Are you hungry? The event is finishing soon. She looked up at him. Miss O usually puts out rice crackers at the end. Then we wait for rice crackers. She smiled and turned back to the window. He stood next to her, smiling at nothing, thinking about 4 words on a small screen. He realized how wrong he had been to sit in a cafe on a Thursday afternoon instead of staying out of sight like he was supposed to. They left the school at 10 past 10. The autumn air outside was sharper now, the morning fully open, the pale sun doing its best. Elowen walked beside him, eating a rice cracker she had wrapped in a small napkin to take with her, completely content. Telling him something about how Sora's grandfather had mispronounced Miss O's name 3 times, and Miss O had corrected him each time with a smile that meant she was not actually smiling. Hajun listened to all of it. He was also scanning every parked car on the street, every face on the pavement, every window above them. There was nothing visible, nothing obvious. But that was the point. If his rivals were watching, they wouldn't make it clear. They were sending a message, not starting a war. Not yet. They know about the girl. How? How did they know? He had been in that cafe by coincidence, or what he had thought was coincidence. Adjusted her backpack straps. Will I see you again? She asked. Quietly, carefully. The way she had asked for help in the cafe, braced for the answer, but asking anyway. Ha-Jun looked at his daughter standing on a Seoul Street corner in the autumn sun, asking him if she would see him again, with no idea that the question had about 9 layers of history inside it. Yes, he said. Not a performance, not a calculated answer. Just the only true thing he had said out loud all morning. Something settled in her face. The small, private satisfaction of someone who had believed something and been right. Okay, she said. Bye, Ha-Jun. Bye, Elowen. She turned and walked down her street. He watched until she turned the corner and was gone. Then he took out his phone and made a call. It was answered on the first ring. Talk, he said. His voice was completely different now, flat, quiet, the temperature of deep water. Everything? From the beginning, the call lasted 9 minutes. By the end of it, Ha-Jun was sitting in the back of a black car parked 2 blocks from the school, window slightly down. The sounds of the city coming in while he stared at a point somewhere beyond the seat in front of him. His lieutenant's voice finished and waited. Ha-Jun said nothing for a moment. Then he said, How long have they known? We think 3 days, maybe 4. Someone flagged an anomaly in the school fee routing. One of the shell accounts. It's a very old account, almost inactive. Whoever found it is good. 3 days. They had found the thread that connected him to Elowen, the anonymous school fee transfers routed carefully through 4 layers. And they had pulled it. They didn't know everything yet, but they knew enough to use her. And Amara? His voice didn't change. What happened to her? There was a pause on the line, careful. We looked into it, like you asked this morning. Tell me. Another pause. Longer. She didn't leave, boss. The words landed in the car like something dropped from a height. Moved, he repeated. Flat, quiet. 8 months after you two, after things ended. Someone from the old Yom faction found out about her. They approached her, told her that staying in Seoul meant you were both in danger. That if she cared about you, she would leave, go somewhere you couldn't find her. He paused for a breath. She believed them, she left to protect you. Took nothing, told no one. Ha-Jun sat very still, the story he had told himself for 10 years. That she had looked at his life and made an intelligent choice, dismantled itself quietly in front of him. Brick by brick. Without drama. She had been pregnant and alone, and she had left to protect him. And somewhere in those 10 years, while he was building an empire and telling himself the distance was necessary, she had gotten sick. He pressed 2 fingers against the bridge of his nose and said nothing for a very long time. Boss, I heard you. There's more. I know there's more, there's always more. He dropped his hand, looked at the window. Tell me, he said. Amara passed away. 14 months ago. Liver disease. She was in Incheon. The girl, Elowen, she's been with the caregiver, a woman named Cha Eun-mi, since then. Cha Eun-mi was Amara's friend from years back. She took the girl in 14 months ago. Elowen had been without her mother for 14 months. Ha-Jun thought about the locket, about the way Elowen had opened it without looking. By feel, by habit, like touching it was as automatic as breathing, like she had been reaching, for it every day since she lost the person inside it. She said to keep it always. So I do. He exhaled slowly through his nose. Outside the car window, Seoul carried on as it always did, vast, indifferent, and filled with people living their everyday lives. None of them knew or cared that in the back of a parked black car, a man sat with 10 years of misbelief finally shattered, and not a single thing he could do to make it right. The rivals, he said, back to the present, back to what could still be controlled. What do they want? Leverage. They're not after the girl, directly. They want you to make a mistake, to move emotionally instead of strategically. If they can get you to expose yourself trying to protect her, they can. I understand what they want. There was a brief pause. What do you want to do? Ha. June looked at the corner where Elowen had disappeared. He thought about a 9-year-old girl who had practiced a speech 14 times on the pavement, who had bought him banana milk with the last of her money, who had drawn a crayon family with a tall figure in a suit, and written my dream family, one day at the bottom, who had reached for his hand in a classroom, not turning it into anything, just reached simply, because she needed to and because somehow she had already decided he was safe. She had decided he was safe. The irony of that could have broken him if he let it. I want to do this right, he said quietly. For once, his lieutenant said nothing. It was not the kind of response that needed a reply. Double the watch on Cha Eun-mi's building, quietly, nothing that draws attention to the street. I want to know every vehicle, every face, every delivery. He paused. And nobody touches that family. Nobody goes near them. If anyone from any faction gets within 2 blocks of that girl, I want to know before they finish parking. Understood. And you? Ha-jun picked up the photo Mizo had printed at the school. He had been holding it since the classroom without realizing it. He looked at it now, himself in the charcoal suit, still and composed, and Elowen beside him, smiling so wide it looked like something that had been waiting years for permission to come out. He had not let himself smile back. He had an entire lifetime of missed moments to account for, and he was going to need every one of them. I'm going to see my daughter, he said. He had not said it out loud before. The word, daughter, sat differently in the air than it did in his chest. Larger, more permanent, more terrifying and more real than anything he had faced in 15 years of running an empire. He heard his lieutenant go very still on the other end of the line. Then quietly, the voice of a man who had served Ha-jun for 12 years and thought he had seen everything. Yes, boss. Ha-jun put the photo in his inside jacket pocket, pressed it flat against his chest, and told the driver to move. He went to the cafe first. Not for any operational reason. No meeting, no contact, nothing strategic. He simply went back to Café Minhua, sat in the same corner booth, ordered the same black coffee, and looked at the empty seat across from him. The seat where a 9-year-old girl had stood 2 days ago with a chewed blue pen and 14 practiced words, and more quiet courage than most people he had ever met. The jazz was playing again, the light was the same. Everything in the cafe was exactly the same. He was the only thing that had changed. He sat there for 20 minutes, drinking his coffee. He didn't read his book. He didn't check his phone. Then he took out a clean piece of paper from his jacket. He always carried one, an old habit, and wrote 4 lines, simple ones. Words a child could read and understand, and not be frightened by. He folded it, wrote her name on the outside. He would not deliver it today, not yet. There were things to handle first, the rivals to neutralize, the situation to control, a conversation he needed to be ready for, because it was the most important conversation of his life. And he was not going to walk into it unprepared. But he wrote it, because he had learned today what it cost to wait. Back at his penthouse, he stood at the window for a long time. The city below him did what it always did, glittered, moved, breathed, asked nothing of him. He had stood at this window through deals and decisions and nights that had cost him things he couldn't get back. He knew this view the way you know a scar. He reached into his pocket and took out the locket photograph, the one his lieutenant had pulled from Amara's Incheon records, and sent through the secure line an hour ago. Amara at 32. The last photo on file, thinner than he remembered, tired in a way that sat in the eyes, but smiling, still smiling even then, that same pressed lip smile that her daughter had inherited completely. He looked at the photograph for a long time. I'm sorry, he said quietly. To the photograph, to the empty penthouse, to 10 years of a story he had been told and had believed because it was easier than looking for the truth. I should have looked harder. The city offered no response. He put the photograph away, picked up the piece of paper with 4 lines, read them once, then tuck it away as well in the inside pocket next to the school photo, The man in the charcoal suit and the girl with the gold clips. Her smile finally free after years of waiting. His phone buzzed. His lieutenant, rivals called a meeting tomorrow night. They want to talk. Ha-jun looked at the city. They want to talk meant they wanted him in a room where they controlled the variables. It meant they were more confident than they should be. It meant they believed that knowing about Eloin gave them something over him. They were right that it changed things. They were wrong about what it changed him into. Set the meeting, he said. My location, my terms. They won't like that. No, Ha-jun agreed, they won't. He ended the call, stood at the window one more moment, then he went to prepare. Because somewhere across the city, a 9-year-old girl was sleeping with a locket around her neck and a folded drawing in her front pocket, unaware that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet imagine. And this time, for the first time, he was going to be ready for her. He showed up at Auntie Cha's building the next morning at 9 o'clock, no driver waiting outside, no jacket this time, just a dark sweater, hands in his pockets, standing at the entrance of an ordinary apartment building in Mapo district, like a completely ordinary person, which he was not. But he was trying. He had stood outside for 3 minutes before pressing the buzzer. That was unexpected. Ryu Ha-jun never hesitated at doors. He made decisions, moved forward, and entered. Hesitation was a gap, and gaps got people hurt. He knew this. He had known it for 15 years. And yet, 3 minutes. The intercom crackled. A woman's voice, cautious, alert, spoke through the static. Who is it? My name is Ha-jun, he said. I was at the school yesterday. With Eloin, there was a long pause. He waited. The door buzzed open. Cha Yun-mi was a small woman in her late 30s with sharp eyes and the particular energy of someone who had been protecting something precious for a long time and was not about to stop now. She opened the apartment door and looked at him the way a person looks at a weather forecast they don't fully trust. Reading him, measuring him, deciding. She did not invite him in immediately. She talked about you all evening, she said plainly the way a person states a fact before they decide what to do with it. Couldn't stop. I need to talk to her, Ha-jun said, and to you first, if you'll allow it. Cha Yun-mi looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped back from the door. He told Auntie Cha everything. He sat across from her, both hands flat on the surface, no coffee offered, none asked for, and told her the truth from the beginning. Amara. The relationship. The disappearance. What his lieutenant had found. What he now knew. He did not make himself sound better than he was. He did not explain away the 10 years. He laid it out plainly, what happened, what he had believed, what had actually been true, and what he intended to do now. Cha Eun-mi sat across from him and listened without interrupting. When he finished, the silence stretched out, settling over everything. She looked at the table for a moment, then she looked at him. Amara talked about you, she said. Her voice had shifted, still careful, but something in it had opened slightly. Not often, but when she did, she stopped, pressed her lips together. She never stopped loving you. Even at the end, she made me promise not to look for you. She said you were safer not knowing. Ha-jun said nothing. She was wrong about that, Cha Eun-mi said quietly. I think she knew she was wrong. But she was scared, sick, and doing the best she could. He nodded once, slowly. The nod of a man receiving something he cannot give back or fix but has to carry anyway. Eloin doesn't know? He asked. She knows her father exists somewhere. Cha Eun-mi looked at the window. Amara told her that her father was a good man who didn't know about her, that it wasn't his fault. She paused. She was protecting you even then. The room stayed quiet. Outside, somewhere in the apartment, a door opened, small footsteps in the hallway. Eloin appeared in the kitchen doorway in her weekend clothes. A yellow sweater, leggings, socks with small clouds on them, hair loose this morning, coils soft around her face. She was holding a book she had clearly been reading, her fingers still keeping her page. She saw Ha-jun and stopped. Her face did the thing it had done at the school gate, that quick, open flash of something she hadn't fully prepared for. You came back, she said. I said I would, he said. Same answer as yesterday. Something small and warm moved across her face. She looked at Auntie Cha, reading the room the way she always did. Sharp, quiet, noticing the particular stillness of two adults who had just finished a serious conversation. What's happening? She asked, directed at both of them equally. Cha Eun-mi stood up, put her hand briefly on Eloin's shoulder as she passed. I'll be in the other room, she said. Call me if you need me. Eloin watched her go. Then she turned back to Ha-jun, walked to the table, and sat down in the chair Cha Eun-mi had just left. very straight, book closed now in her lap, her hands folded on top of it. Waiting. Ha-jun looked at her across the small kitchen table. He had prepared words for this, careful ones, the right order, the right pace, the same way he prepared for every important conversation. He had gone over it in his head 3 times on the drive here. Every prepared word left him completely. Elowen, he said, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything. Can you do that? She nodded. Once, serious, he breathed in. Your mother's name was Amara, he said, and I knew her, a long time ago, before you were born. We knew each other very well. He kept his voice steady, slow. Every word placed carefully, like stepping across stones over deep water. She left Seoul before I knew she was going to leave. I spent a long time thinking. She chose to go, that she made that decision herself. There was a pause. I found out yesterday that I was wrong. Someone told her that leaving was the only way to keep both of us safe. She believed them. She left to protect me. Elowen had not moved. Her eyes were fixed on his face with complete attention. She was alone, he continued. And she was brave, and she raised you. He stopped for just a moment. And she never told me about you. Because she believed, she truly believed, that knowing would put you both in danger. The sound of the room clock ticking filled the silence. I found out the truth yesterday, Ha-jun said, when you showed me the locket. Elowen's hand drifted to her collar, moving slowly. She found the locket and held it, not opening it. The woman in your locket, Ha-jun said quietly. I knew her face before you showed it to me. The moment you walked into that cafe, I didn't understand why at first. I told myself I was imagining things. He looked at her directly. I wasn't imagining things. Elowen's breathing had changed, slower, deeper. The way breathing changes when a person is holding themselves very still on the inside. I don't want to say something and then disappear, he said, so I'm only going to say it if I can mean it completely, and I can mean it completely. He leaned forward slightly, both hands on the table. Elowen, I'm your father. The word landed in the room like something that had been falling for a very long time and had finally reached the ground. Elowen stared at him. She didn't cry, not immediately, she just stared. Processing, sorting, running the information through every part of herself that knew how to check if something was real. You knew my mom, she said. Not a question but a confirmation. Yes, and you didn't know about me. No, I didn't know. He held her gaze. If I had known, he stopped, started again. There is nothing in this world that would have kept me away from you. Nothing. Her chin moved, a small tremor, quickly controlled. She said you were a good man, Elowen said. Her voice was very quiet now. My mom. She told me my father was a good man who didn't know. Something cracked in Ha-jun's chest, clean through. She was kinder to me than I deserved, he said honestly. Elowen looked down at the book in her lap. Her finger traced the edge of the cover, back and forth, back and forth. The small movement of a person who needs something to do with their hands, while their mind works through something enormous. You funded my school, she said suddenly. He went still. She looked up. The anonymous payments. Auntie Cha always said it was a scholarship fund, but she never had the paperwork and she always changed the subject when I asked. Her eyes were steady on his. That was you. He said nothing for a moment, then yes. For how long, she asked. Since you started school, he replied. She absorbed the words, then looked back down at her book. After a moment she glanced up again. So you knew I existed, she said. Somewhere, I knew a child existed, who needed what I could give without getting close, he said. I didn't let myself think further than that. A pause. That was a mistake. I'm done making it. The room was very quiet. Then Elowen put her book on the table. She stood up from her chair. She walked around the table, her movements steady and purposeful. She didn't hurry. When she stood before him, she took a moment. Her gaze focused on his face, studying him with the same careful attention she had given the room when she first walked in. Whatever she was looking for, she found it. She stepped forward and put her arms around him, not carefully. Not the polite, measured way she did most things. She just held on. Her face pressed against his shoulder, arms around as much of him as she could reach, the book forgotten on the table behind her. Ha-jun sat completely still for 1 second, then he put his arms around his daughter. He held her the way you hold something you didn't know you had lost until the exact moment it was back in your hands. Carefully, completely. Like he was afraid to hold too tight and equally afraid to let go. From the hallway, Cha Eun-mi stood just out of sight with her hand over her mouth and tears running silently down her face. Nobody spoke for a long time. Eventually, Elowen pulled back. She didn't go far, just far enough to look at his face again. Her eyes were wet, but she hadn't let a single tear fall, and he recognized that too. That particular stubborn dignity, he had it himself. I have a lot of questions, she said. I know, he said. A lot, she repeated, firmly. I'll answer every one. She studied him. Today, tomorrow, as many days as you need, she paused, considering it carefully. Then, with a single decisive nod, one that signaled the end of a negotiation, she returned to her chair. She picked up her book, placed it in front of her, and stared at the first page, though she didn't actually read it. Ha-Jun watched her. Ha-Jun, she said, her eyes still on the page. Yes, there was a pause. Small, careful, like the pause before she had said Appa on the park bench. Is it okay if I still call you Appa? She said. He watched the child sitting across from him, wearing cloud socks and a yellow sweater, asking for the one thing he had desired ever since the moment she walked into that cafe, and shifted the course of everything. It's more than okay, he said. She nodded. Turned a page she hadn't read. He stayed at that table for the next 4 hours. He was still there at 2 in the afternoon when his phone vibrated. He looked at it under the table so Elowen wouldn't see. His lieutenant. One line. Rivals moved up the meeting. Tonight. They're not waiting. Ha-Jun watched Elowen across the table as she spoke about her science project, the real version, every detail spilling out. Her hands moved animatedly as she talked, completely engaged, the way children are when they find someone truly listening to them. He typed back one word, ready, put the phone away, and gave his daughter the rest of the afternoon. The meeting was set for 9 o'clock. A restaurant in Gangnam. Private room, back entrance, the kind of place that looked completely normal from the outside and had very soundproof walls on the inside. Ha-Jun had used it before himself. That was why he had chosen it. He knew every exit, every blind spot, every corner a person could stand in and not be seen. His rivals had agreed to his location because they thought they still had the advantage. They thought Elowen was the advantage. Ha-Jun arrived at 8:45. He wore a charcoal suit. Same one as the cafe, as the school. He had not chosen that on purpose. Or maybe he had. He was not entirely sure anymore what he did on purpose and what his hands just decided without him. 2 of his men were already inside, sitting at separate tables in the main dining area, looking like ordinary customers, ordering things they would not eat. 2 more were outside, one on the roof of the building across the street. Standard positioning, practiced so many times it required no thought. What required thought was the piece of paper still folded in his inside jacket pocket. The 4 lines he had written for Elowen the night before. He had not delivered it yet. He had spent 4 hours today answering questions. She had questions about everything, delivered in rapid, systematic order like she had been saving them up her whole life, which she had. And at no point had the afternoon felt like the right time to hand a child a letter that said, if something happens to me tonight, this is what I need you to know. He would deliver it tomorrow. Nothing was going to happen tonight. He sat in the private room and waited. They came in at 9:03, 2 men, Park Sung-jin, the one who had sent the message about Elowen, and an older man Ha-Jun did not recognize, which meant he was new money, or new to Seoul, or both. New people trying to claim old territory. Ha-Jun had seen it before. Park Sung-jin was the kind of man who smiled with all of his face except his eyes. He sat down across from Ha-Jun and smiled that smile and said, "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "I didn't agree," Ha-Jun said pleasantly. "I set the terms, there's a difference." The smile stayed. Of course, they talked for 20 minutes about things that were not the real conversation. Territory lines, business interests, mutual concerns. Ha-Jun listened carefully and said very little. He had learned a long time ago that the person who says least in a room usually understands it best. Then Park Sung-jin set both hands flat on the table. "The girl," he said. Ha-Jun looked at him. "Elowen." Park said the name carefully, watching Ha-Jun's face for the reaction. "Mapo District, Eunbit Elementary. She's been living with a woman named Cha Eun-mi for the past 14 months. He paused. "Since her mother passed," Ha-Jun said nothing. "We know she's yours," Park said. "We've known for 4 days. He leaned forward slightly. "Here is what we are proposing. You step back from the Incheon port contracts, all 3 of them. You redirect the northern distribution lines through our network. And in return," another smile, "the girl stays exactly where she is. Safe, comfortable, completely unbothered." The private room was very quiet. Ha-Jun looked at Park Sung-jin for a long moment. Then he said calmly and without any particular emotion, "You just made a threat against my daughter in a room I chose, at a time I set, surrounded by people I positioned." He picked up the glass of water in front of him and drank slowly. "Set it down. I want you to think about what that tells you about how prepared I am for this conversation. Park's smile did not move, but something behind his eyes shifted. I'm not threatening anyone, Park said carefully. I'm offering protection. No, Ha-jun said. You're telling me you know where she lives and expecting that to be enough to make me afraid. He stood up slowly, unhurried. It isn't enough. And I want you to go back to whoever sent you and tell them exactly that. He buttoned his jacket. This meeting is finished, he said. And if anyone from your organization comes within 2 blocks of that building in Mapo district, any car, any face, any delivery, I will consider it a declaration. And I will respond accordingly. He looked at Park directly. I have been patient and careful for 15 years because I had things to protect from a distance. I have something much closer to protect now. That does not make me careful. He paused. It makes me different. He walked out. His phone rang at 11:47 that night. He was back at the penthouse, jacket off, going through the operational response plan his lieutenant had prepared. Steps, contingencies, the careful dismantling of Park's network before it could move on anything. Clean work, strategic, the kind of thing he was good at. The number on the phone was Cha Eun-mi's. He answered immediately. Her voice came through fast and low, controlled but only barely. She's gone. In that instant, the operational plan ceased to exist. What happened? The words landed flat, cold, not a question. I put her to bed at 10. I checked at 11 and her window, a breath. Her window was open. She left a note. It says, Cha Eun-mi's voice broke slightly. It says he heard you on the phone earlier. I know they're coming for me. I'm not going to let them use me against my appa. Don't worry, I have a plan. Ha-jun was already in motion, jacket on, keys in hand, out the door. She heard me on the phone, he said, not to Cha Eun-mi, to himself. He had taken one call this afternoon, his lieutenant updating him on Park's movements. He had stepped into the hallway. He had thought she was still at the kitchen table. She had been in the hallway, of course she had. She was Amara's daughter. She listened from doorways. She filed things away and acted on them later when the adults weren't watching. She was also his daughter, and she had decided at 9 years old in cloud socks and a yellow sweater that she was not going to be used as a weapon against her father. Something moved through Ha-jun that was equal parts terror and a love so fierce it had no name yet. I know where she went, he said. He knew because he knew her now. Not long, 4 days, a cafe, a park bench, a school, a kitchen table. But he had been paying attention with everything he had, the way he paid attention to things that mattered, and he knew the way she thought. She was strategic. She would go somewhere familiar. Somewhere she felt she had control, somewhere that was hers. The cafe, Cafe Munhwa, it was closed at this hour. Dark windows, chairs stacked inside, the jazz replaced by silence. But he had noticed on the first day that the side alley next to the building had a small covered bench outside the staff entrance. The kind of spot you would only know about if you had walked past it slowly and looked. Elowen had walked past it on the way to the school. Ha-jun came around the corner into the alley and stopped. She was there, sitting on the bench in her coat. She had at least taken her coat. Backpack on her lap, her hands folded on top of it. In the dark, she was a small shape under the amber spill of one weak streetlight, and she looked up when she heard his footsteps and her face did something complicated. Relief, guilt, stubbornness. In that order, he stopped in front of her. He did not raise his voice. He was not going to raise his voice at this child, not tonight, not ever, not for any reason. Elowen, he said. I heard the call, she said immediately. Chin up, exactly the way she had stood in the cafe doorway 4 days ago. I know they know where I live. I know they're going to try to use me. She looked at him steadily. I didn't want to be the reason something bad happened to you. Ha-jun crouched down, eye level. The same way he had crouched to speak to the boy at the school. Listen to me, he said, quiet, direct. You are 9 years old. Protecting me is not your job. It has never been your job, and it will never be your job. He held her gaze. That is my job. That is the one thing I am absolutely certain I am supposed to do. Do you understand? Her chin moved. The small tremor again, controlled again. They said they'd leave me alone if you gave them what they wanted, she said. I heard that part too. I know, so why didn't you just? Because giving people what they want when they make threats does not make them go away, he said simply. It tells them that threats work, and then they make more. He watched her process this. I am handling it, my way, which does not involve you sitting alone in a dark alley at midnight. She looked at the ground. I had a plan, she said, quieter now. Tell me the plan. She hesitated. I was going to stay here until morning and then go to the school and tell Miss, oh, I needed to stay somewhere safe for a few days, and maybe she would call. She stopped, heard herself. It wasn't a very good plan. It was a brave plan, he said, and a bad plan. Both things, she almost smiled, didn't quite. He sat down on the bench beside her. The same small gap she always left, polite, careful, and he closed it this time, sitting close enough that their shoulders touched. She didn't move away. I've been keeping you safe from a distance for a long time, he said. School fees, watching, making sure nothing came close to you. He looked at the dark street. I thought that was enough. I thought distance was the same as protection. He paused. It isn't. I know that now. She was quiet beside him. Real protection means being here, he said, next to you. Not across the city making transfers into accounts. He looked at her. I'm not going anywhere. And I am going to handle the people who think they can use you. Not because of business. Because you are my daughter and there is no version of any situation where I let someone use my daughter. Elowen looked at him for a long moment. Then she leaned sideways and put her head against his arm, not dramatically, just rested it there. The way a person leans against something solid when they have been standing on their own for too long and their legs have finally had enough. Ha-Jun did not move. Above them the city hummed. A taxi passed at the end of the alley. Somewhere distant a convenience store sign buzzed. I was scared, she said, very quietly. Not for me. For you. I know, he said. Is that normal, being more scared for someone else than for yourself? He thought about Amara leaving Seoul to protect him, about Cha Eun-mi spending 14 months protecting Elowen because a dying woman had asked her to, about a 9-year-old girl climbing out of a window in her coat because she had decided she was not going to be the reason her father got hurt. Yes, he said, it's normal. There was a pause. It means you love someone. She absorbed this quietly. Appa, she said. Yes. I'm glad I walked into that cafe. He looked at the top of her head. Dark coils, gold clips still in from this morning. One slightly crooked now. So am I, he said. More than you know. He kept her close for the next 72 hours, not in a frightening way, not in a way that felt like hiding. He moved her and Cha Eun-mi to a safe apartment 2 districts over, comfortable, warm, a building he controlled and trusted completely. He told Elowen it was temporary. He told her the truth about how long it would take to resolve. He did not make it smaller than it was, and he did not make it larger. She asked questions every day. He answered every one. On the second day she asked him if he was a good person. He was quiet for a moment. I have done things that were not good, he said. To protect something I thought mattered. I'm not sure the reasons always justified the things. He looked at her. I want to be better than what I have been. I think that is the most honest answer I can give you. She thought about this seriously. My mom said good people aren't always the ones who never do wrong things, she said. She said they're the ones who know the difference. She paused, and who keep trying. Ha-Jun looked at his daughter. Amara had raised her. Even sick, even alone, even carrying everything by herself in an apartment in Incheon. She had raised this child with wisdom and warmth, and the kind of love that leaves something permanent behind. Your mother, he said carefully, was the best person I ever knew. Elowen's fingers gently rested on the locket. She held it in her hand, not opening it this time, just grasping it quietly. She would have liked today, she said softly. You and me, talking like this. He could not speak for a moment. Yes, he said when he could. She would have. On the third day Ha-Jun's lieutenant sent one message. It's done. Park Sung-jin's network. The shell companies, the leveraged contracts, the 2 assets that had moved into Seoul as a provocation 3 days ago, dismantled. Not violently, strategically, financially. The way Ha-Jun had always preferred to work, not with noise but with precision, cutting the threads one by one until the whole thing came apart quietly. Park had made one mistake that all people who underestimated Ha-Jun made eventually. He had assumed that having something over Ha-Jun would make Ha-Jun smaller. It had made him faster. Ha-Jun read the message, put his phone down, walked to the living room of the safe apartment where Elowen was sitting on the floor with Cha Eun-mi doing something with flashcards, studying for a test she still had coming up next week, because Elowen had decided that dangerous situations were not a valid reason to fall behind in school. He stood in the doorway and looked at them. It's handled, he said simply. Cha Eun-mi closed her eyes briefly, opened them and nodded. Elowen looked up from her flashcards. Can we go home? She asked. Tomorrow, he said. I want one more day to make sure. She accepted this with a nod, picked up her flashcard. Then, will you quiz me? Auntie Cha keeps giving me the easy ones. I do not, said Cha Eun-mi firmly. Ha-Jun walked in and sat on the floor beside his daughter. She handed him the stack of flashcards without ceremony, pulled her knees up and looked at him with the focused expression of someone ready to be tested. He looked at the first card. Outside, Seoul moved through its ordinary evening, cars and lights and the city going about its business, completely unaware that in a safe apartment 2 districts from Mapo, a man who had spent 15 years building walls was sitting cross-legged on a floor holding a child's flashcards, learning, slowly, what it meant to stay. They went home on a Tuesday morning. Nothing dramatic about it, no convoy, no security visible, no production. Just Ha Jun's black car pulling up outside Chayun-mi's building, in Mapo district, Eloin climbing out with her backpack and her cloud socks and her locket, and Auntie Cha following with 2 bags and the particular expression of a woman who had held everything together through sheer stubbornness, and was now allowing herself to breathe. Eloin stood on the pavement outside her building and looked up at it. Same building, same street, same convenience store on the corner where the Agiosi had told her everyone liked banana milk. Everything was exactly as it had been, and yet nothing felt the same. She turned to Ha Jun, standing quietly beside her. It looks smaller, she said. Buildings do that, he said. When things change, she thought about this, nodded, then walked through the entrance, like she owned every step, which she did. And Ha Jun followed her in. He spent the morning there. He wasn't doing anything important, and that was exactly the point. He sat at the kitchen table, while Cha and Mi moved around, preparing breakfast. Eloin talked about the test she had coming up, her frustration with a math question from last semester that still bothered her. He sipped the coffee Cha Eun-mi set in front of him, answered her questions, and simply listened. He was very good at listening now. Around 11, Eloin disappeared into her room and came back with something in her hand. The drawing from Family Day, the crayon family in red, the tall figure in the suit, the building with the big windows. She had kept it flat in the important pocket of her backpack, and it had survived everything without a crease. She put it on the table in front of him. I want to frame it, she said simply. Ha Jun looked at the drawing, at the small sunflower he had added at the bottom. At her handwriting, my dream family one day. Then we frame it, he said. She picked it back up carefully. I'll find a frame that fits. She disappeared back into her room with the focus of someone who had already decided exactly how this was going to go. Cha Eun-mi sat down across from him with her own coffee. She looked at him for a moment without speaking. She asked me last night if you were going to keep coming back. She wrapped both hands around her cup. I told her I thought so, she said. There was a small pause, a pressed lip smile that reminded him powerfully of Amara. She said good, because she already put him in the drawing so it would be weird if he stopped. Ha Jun looked at the table. Something moved through him that was warm and enormous and didn't fit neatly inside a chest built for colder things. I'm going to need to learn how to do this, he said quietly. I don't know how. I want to be honest about that. Cha Eun-mi looked at him steadily. Nobody knows how at the beginning. Amara didn't know how either. She paused. She figured it out, one day at a time. Another pause, gentler. You will too. He nodded. From Eloin's room came the sound of drawers opening, things being moved, the determined rummaging of a child on a mission. Ha Jun and Cha Eun-mi sat at the kitchen table and drank their coffee. For the first time in a very long time, a Tuesday morning felt like enough. That afternoon, he went to the cafe alone. He did not tell Eloin where he was going, just that he had something to take care of and he would be back for dinner. She had looked up from the frame she was examining. Slightly too big, she was negotiating this problem seriously, and said okay and went back to her measuring. He drove to Gangnam, parked and walked. Cafe Munhwa looked exactly as it always did. Floor-to-ceiling windows, warm amber light, jazz drifting from hidden speakers, the smell of coffee and almond pastry pulling at something in him the way familiar things do when they have become attached to important memories. He walked over to the corner booth. His booth. He sat down, the familiar creak of the seat a small comfort. This time he ordered black coffee, the kind he would actually drink. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his laptop, the secondary one. The one that connected to the web of accounts, transfers, and financial threads that had, for years, formed the unseen structure of his other life. The one that ran silently in the background, funding, moving, and keeping everything just out of view, ensuring the distances between things remained carefully preserved. He opened it, found the oldest account, the first one, the one that had been set up 9 years ago when an anonymous tip had reached him through 2 layers of separated contacts, telling him only that a child existed somewhere who shared his bloodline and needed school fees covered. He had never verified it. He had told himself he didn't need to. He had set up the transfer and not looked any further because looking further meant deciding something he was not ready to decide. He looked at it now, the full record. 9 years of transfers, every semester, every school trip fee, every small addition when costs had gone up. A thread of care so thin and so carefully maintained that it had been invisible to everyone, including almost himself. He closed the account. Not because the money would stop, that was being reorganized already properly through channels that had his actual name on them, but because the anonymous distance was finished, the architecture of watching from the correct distance was finished. He did not need hidden accounts and separated contacts and careful layers of separation to take care of his daughter. He needed to show up. He deleted the account structure methodically, file by file, each one a version of himself that had believed protection meant staying away, each one a year of Elowen's life he had funded from the edges of. It took 11 minutes. When he was done, he closed the laptop and sat back. The jazz played softly. The afternoon light came through the windows, in long golden sheets, the way it had the first day. The barista moved behind the counter. A woman typed in the corner. 2 men murmured over espresso cups. Everything exactly the same as that Thursday 3 weeks ago when a small girl in a navy uniform had pushed through the door and scanned the room and found him in his corner booth and walked toward him with her chin up and her hands gripping her backpack, straps, and 14 practiced words ready. He thought about how close he had come to not being there that afternoon. How completely accidental it had been. A rare free afternoon, a cafe chosen for no particular reason. A man sitting alone with an unread paperback and an untouched coffee, trying to remember what ordinary felt like. Fate, perhaps, or Amara. He looked at the empty seat across from him. The one where Elowen had stood, not sat, because she was too nervous to sit, too determined to stay standing until she had said what she came to say. He reached into his inside jacket pocket, took out the folded piece of paper. The 4 lines he had written the night everything changed, the letter he had meant to give her if the meeting with Park Sung-jin had gone differently. He unfolded it. Read it. Elowen, I don't know how to be a father, but I know how to learn things that matter, and nothing has ever mattered more than this. I'm staying. Ha-jun. He folded it again. He was not going to give it to her now. The crisis was over, the danger was handled, the dramatic moment for a letter like this had passed. She didn't need a letter anymore. She needed dinner. She needed someone to quiz her on flashcards. She needed a frame for her drawing and an answer to the math question she was still not over, and someone to be at the table when she woke up in the morning and at the door when she came home from school. She needed the ordinary things. He had spent 15 years being extraordinary at the wrong things and ordinary at nothing. It was time to learn. He put the letter back in his pocket. Drank his coffee, all of it this time while it was still warm. Then he put some money on the table, closed his laptop, stood up, and buttoned his jacket. He was back in Mapo district by 5:30. Elowen heard him at the door before he knocked. He heard her footsteps crossing the apartment floor at speed, which was new and which did something immediate to his chest. And she opened the door, already talking. I found a frame, she announced. It's a little bit of gold, which I think is right because gold is important. Also, Auntie Cha is making japchae for dinner, and she put extra mushrooms in yours because I told her you looked like someone who would like mushrooms. Do you like mushrooms? Ha-jun stood in the doorway and looked at his daughter. Bright-eyed, curls loose, the slightly crooked gold clip still exactly where it had been for 3 days apparently, the framed drawing held up in both hands for his inspection. The frame was gold, small, the right size. Inside it the Crayon family stood in front of the building with the big windows and the sunflower at the door, and at the bottom in careful printed letters, My dream family, one day. Only the one day had been crossed out. In its place, in the same careful blue pen handwriting, Elowen had written one word, now. Ha-jun looked at the drawing for a long moment, at the crossed-out words, at the one that replaced them, at this child standing in a doorway holding up the thing she had made and changed and decided to keep. Not as a wish anymore, but as a fact. I like mushrooms, he said. She beamed. He walked through the door. She walked beside him down the hallway, still talking. Something about the frame, something about the gold being the right choice. Something about how Sora had texted to ask where she had been. And she had said family things, which was true and also felt very good to say. Ha-jun listened to all of it. From the kitchen came the smell of japchae, and the sound of cha-on-mi humming something under her breath, and the warm light of an ordinary evening in an ordinary apartment in Mapo district spilled out into the hallway and reached them both. He sat down at the table. Elowen sat across from him, same table, same chairs, same kitchen, and set the framed drawing carefully against the wall where they could both see it. She looked at it, then at him. Does it look right there? She asked. He looked at the drawing, at the crayon figures, at the word she had chosen. Now. It looks exactly right, he said. She nodded, satisfied, picked up her flashcards from the corner of the table where she had left them. Quiz me while we wait, she said. Auntie Cha takes forever with the mushrooms. I do not, said Cha On-mi from the kitchen. Ha-jun picked up the flashcards. Outside, Seoul moved through its evening, the city enormous and indifferent as always, lights coming on one by one as the sky darkened, traffic humming, millions of lives happening all at once. And in one small kitchen in Mapo district, a man who had spent 15 years running an empire from a careful distance sat across a table from the 9-year-old girl who had walked into a cafe and changed everything, and read her the first card. No more pretending, no more distance, no more watching from the edges of a life that was asking to be lived, just this. A table, a drawing on the wall, the smell of japchae, a stack of flashcards, a daughter who talked faster than most people thought, and expected him to keep up. He was going to keep up, one day at a time, starting now,